Welcome to, can you hear me back there? So, so people at the back, can you hear me? All right. So, clinical trials are nothing new. Clinical trials have been ongoing since a long time ago. So even back in 500 BC, we did have clinical research in which, the various foods and herbs that were used at that time, people tried to figure out if they were useful. And over time, at that time, they didn't have placebo-controlled trials. Over time, we have perfected and we've changed the way in which we do research, but research has been going on for a very long time now. So over time, what happened was that research was going along. There weren't so many regulations. People were kind of just trying it. Then World War II happened, and as we know, there was a lot of tragedies, a lot of rules broken during that time, including in clinical research. And there was times when research was done, people were tested on without their permission. And so after World War II, there was a bunch of trials, and this was across the world, that people came together and brought in this big thing about consent, where it has to be informed consent, where people know about the risks and benefits of the research that they're entering into, and that there should be independent bodies reviewing the research. So now, any research is submitted to something called an IRB, or an Institutional Review Board. Now, this is an independent body, meaning they are not related to the sponsors. They are different from the people conducting the study and obviously from the people participating. So this is an independent body, and it is composed of some scientists, some community members, such as yourself, sometimes even some religious personnel are allowed to be in the committee, and that is if there are ethical or religious concerns. So this institutional board of people, independent, reviews the whole protocol, reviews the research plan, and comments that yes, this is safe for the patient, this is ethical, this is not putting the patient at some grave harm. And only after the IRB approves a trial can a trial go forward. And any time after the trial is started, if there is some change in how the trial is going to be conducted, that needs to be approved by the IRB. So some common questions that come up in trials while people participate in research, and hopefully during the course of the day you'll get answers to some of them. One is, why a placebo? And what is a placebo? So basically, a placebo is a substance in the trial that doesn't have the active ingredient. Also, it's called the sugar pill. So now, why do we even have placebo? Why not everyone have the active drug? Well, just because if everyone knew that they were taking the active drug, which obviously everyone's hopeful will work, then the participant feels better, the person who's conducting, the physician who's examining you, he's hopeful that it'll work. So in general, the results will look more positive than they may be. So that is why, to have this element of no bias, we have a placebo in which no one knows. The patient doesn't know, the researcher doesn't know, so that it can be an unbiased opinion about how the drug works. Now, one of the questions is, why me? Why am I being made the guinea pig? Well, one, it's not lab research that most of you will participate in. So the trial, before it comes to human phases, it's gone through the lab phase, it's gone through the animal phase, it's gone through various phases. There's been a lot of safety testing done on it. And there's one thing that one phase of research that only can go forward is if a Parkinson's patient participates in it, meaning you can have healthy volunteers, you can have safety data. However, whether the medication is effective for the condition can only be tested in patients with Parkinson's disease. So it's not really, am I a guinea pig, but can I contribute to the development of a new drug, being aware that there are enough safety protections that are inbuilt into the system. So then why me? Because there are so many trials that are wanting participants, that there are so many medications that are waiting to make it from the lab on the pharmacy shelves. And the more patients that participate, the faster those drugs can make it to the market. So as a clinical trial participant, you do have access to top-notch researchers and clinicians, and all of this is typically at no charge to you, because most of the time the sponsor who is testing the product is the one who's paying for the care. Now, the phases of a clinical trial, it moves from lab to first in human trials. In first in human trials, typically you're testing it in healthy volunteers, and you're trying to make sure that it's tolerated okay, that it doesn't affect the liver adversely, that it's tolerated by the kidneys okay, the blood stays okay. After that, you typically test it on patients who have the condition. So it would be tested in a small number of patients who have Parkinson's, and then you test that, yes, it is tolerated well with the patients who have the condition. So first you tested it's safe for healthy volunteers, then you tested that it's safe for people with the condition, and then last of all, you are testing it in a double-blind fashion to make sure it is safe as well as is effective. And then sometimes people feel, when I come to the clinic, I can just be seen every 4 months. And now there are so many visits, and these visits are so long. And why is that? Well, because the meds you're taking in the clinic have gone through this long process. And so we know how safe they are. And people have used it over time, so they know how to monitor it. But when there's a new drug, then you need lots more testing. You want to check the liver, you want to check the blood, you want to check the EKG, you want to check blood pressure, pulse, heart rate. You want to make sure everything is okay, and that is why the research visits need to be long. Oftentimes, the research visits are also long because you want to check how long it takes for the blood levels to rise and to get eliminated. So sometimes there'll be lots of blood draws in which after you take the product there, and then they draw the blood levels. They draw multiple blood levels to make sure, to check how long the product actually stays in your system. Now, most of the times you won't need multiple pokes. Sometimes they can put an IV line in and just draw blood from there. So what can be some of the possible side effects? Well, the side effects will always be possible, known side effects will always be stated in the informed consent. And you will always be given a copy of that informed consent at the beginning of the trial. The purpose of the long visits, the purpose of calling you so often is to capture any possible side effect you may have. So it's a good idea. Your study team will always give you a number that you can call them at, and that's generally accessible 24 hours. So if you have a side effect, let them know. And all of the sites that are doing the trial actually share this information with each other. So if someone here in Washington gets a side effect, if there's a site in Miami doing it, they'll be exchanging that information. So the sponsor will let them know. So we won't be blindsided that, okay, this side effect was happening and we didn't know about it. So what if you get side effects? You would let your treating doctor know, and they will treat. Now, one of the questions that comes about is, what about who'll pay if I get side effects? Well, most of the times, this will get paid by the study sponsor if it's related to the study product. And so this will also be spelt out in the informed consent. And then one of the things is, if I participate now, is it going to take like 10 years, 20 years before the product comes to market? Well, things have gotten streamlined over time, and actually things are moving along at a pretty fast clip now. So there are the phases, this whole phase from preclinical to phase 4, meaning preclinical, it's in the lab, phase 1, healthy volunteers, phase 2, tested in people with the condition, phase 3, again, testing, double blind. Phase 4 is when it's already available in market, meaning even after the new drug gets approved, FDA continues to monitor the safety of the product. And so for several years after a product is approved, there'll be phase 4 trials in which we deal with real life experience. How are people dealing with this medication in real life? And even if there are any side effects, they do get reported to the FDA. So potential new medicines, it actually takes more than $1 billion. The average is $2.6 billion for a medicine to make it from the preclinical phase to the study approval phase. And that's not counting the money spent on the drugs who don't make it all the way. So this is an expensive proposition people are talking about. So volunteers are needed so that now obviously if a study is going along and they're investing all these billions of dollars and they can't find participants to participate in the trial, there's only so much money people can have, so some of those trials will just close, and then the drug won't go to market. So at the center of this is the patient, and you're surrounded with the safety net during a trial. And the safety net includes the IRB, the FDA, the other sites, as well as the sponsor who has a medical monitor, who, if there's a question, your treating doctor will talk to the medical monitor who's working at the sponsor's company. So there's a Fox Trial Finder, and this is a website or a link where you can go and register, and this tries to match you up with various clinical trials. So if you go in and enter your data, they try to match you up with trials that are going on anywhere in the US and locally, so that you can then decide if you want to enroll in it. We also have a Washington State registry in which you can enter your data, so that if there's a local trial, it'll match you up with it. So these are some trials that actually have gotten approved. We just did the trial a few years ago, and the drugs are already available in market. There might be some of you in the room who've participated in trials with these drugs, and in front of them, they were able to exit the trial, and a few months later, they were actually able to take these medications by prescription. So it's actually not that long before a medication goes into trials and can come to market. So I'll end with this. I'll talk more about these in the afternoon session. But one of the things in this slide, you'll find that there are several patients, though 60% of Parkinson's patients expressed an interest that they wanted to do clinical trials, less than 10% actually did. And so if only 10% of Parkinson's patients participate in trials, we have 90% who don't. And there are large amount of clinical trials that do not meet their numbers. So hopefully, during the course of today, you'll find some of your questions and concerns about participating in clinical trials answered. And with that, I don't want to encroach on Dr. Mishli's time, so.